Tom Lavecchia here with the latest and special edition of the Armchair MBA. I'm Tom Lavecchia. It's my co-host, Jason Capital. Jason, how you doing today?
Excellent. Glad to be here. Glad to be doing this interview. I've watched this gentleman on YouTube. I read part of his book, and I'm about to finish it soon. So I'm very excited to see what we can dive into today.
Yeah, this is a big guest. And before we jump in, Jason, is Jason Capital. If you need money for your business, he gives loans and so forth. And then also does training if you're looking to be a loan officer. So this next guest is the man, trouble in the Everglades City, Tim McBride, one of the biggest pot haulers in history. Tim McBride, welcome to the Armchair MBA. How you doing today, man?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, man. That very cool with that picture you started with right there. That was centerfold out of Life magazine in 1984.
Yeah, why don't we jump in? Tell us about how that came about.
Yeah, what you're seeing, in the foreground behind the riding bit part is an aerial view of just a very small sliver of the 10,000 islands, and this is in the area. And that's the backside of the 10,000 islands. That's the island Chokoloskee that we actually lived on, that one there. But it's a labyrinth of literally 10,000 islands, and that's where us as kids, that's where we played. That's where we screwed around, man. And we could lose you in there in a heartbeat. All you had to do is just try to follow us in there. But that picture right there talks about the second operation that they did. The United States government came down with over 270 federal agents from every branch of law enforcement under in North America, and they started to effect arrest. This was their second time doing this, because the first time they showed up a year before that, the intelligence that the older generations had was as such that they knew they were coming 2 weeks before they got there. So, it was pretty much a failure. So they turned right around and came back the next year, and the older guys, they just said, oh, screw it. They hung around just waiting for the show to start, but that was pictures of, Life magazine was just one of the reporting agencies that were on the island, and literally was written in that article where there were more reporters on the island that day than there were people being arrested. And Everglades just happened to be one of them. And they went on 18 pages. It was unprecedented at that time, or even still for Life magazine, about a 18-page article about a small town in Southwest Florida. It says, tarred with drug smuggling, and most of its 600 residents say, so what?
Unreal.
But that's just how it was. I mean, it was, the magnitude at which it was taking place, wasn't known right away. It wasn't known for many, many years how deep this thing actually ran, how sophisticated of an operation it actually was. I was just a kid growing up with a bunch of other kids, and of course we were the workhorse for the adults. They're not the ones out there humping these 800 or 1,070-pound, 80-pound bales, every night, 2-3 times a night. Hell no, they ain't doing that shit. The kids are doing that, man.
Before that came out, when did you get down there? What year?
I got down there in 1979.
79.
Yeah.
It was a cousin of yours that brought you down there to do some crabbing?
Well, it was actually, I had just, I spent a couple of years out in LA working for an entertainer by the name of Sammy Davis Jr.
Right.
I was doing some offhand videotaping and stuff like that, and I got tired of that crap. So when I got back to where I did my high school years in Wisconsin, grew up in North Carolina. My dad was 82nd Airborne, and he took a job as a salesman in the Chicagoland area between Milwaukee and Chicago. And my buddy, next door neighbor, he called me one day and he says, dude, I'm going to Florida. He says, my sister-in-law and my sister and my brother-in-law run a fish house on this little island down there in Everglades, and I'm going to go work on a boat. You want to go? And I said, hell yeah, man. I just packed my shit like that, and hopped in my Mustang, my Cobra, and off I was, gone the next day. And I had no aspirations or didn't know anything about it. We didn't go down there we didn't go down there planning on being a pot hauler. It just.
All right. Was your buddy like, they're making a kill, not with the pot, with the fish boats, with the crabbing? Was it like, oh, they're making a killing down there? We gotta go. We're gonna make a shitload of money. Like, what was your inspiration to go down there? Just because you weren't doing nothing, or because you heard they were making
pretty much because he called me and said he was going to Florida the next day.
Right.
You know, that's how I wound up in LA, and basically that's how I wound up pretty much everywhere I've wound up in my life. If something came along, and and I had to give it a thought for a second and think, to myself that, did I, and it happened enough to try to work this into as a way of life or a philosophy of life, rather than if something better, seemingly better come along, that I would just do it rather than sit back and think about it later on saying, damn, I wish I'd have done that shit. I just did it. So at the spur of the moment, I didn't have really any shit going on, so I packed my shit and off I went, because he was going, and, one thing led to another, and it was, it wasn't long, but, we got down there, and of course he had a job working on this boat for a guy named Billy Potter, Captain Billy, we call him. His name is Captain Red in the book. And there's only 3 people on the boat. There's a captain, there's a first mate and a second mate. There's the two guys on the stern that are actually pulling all those traps.
Oh, wow.
And
one goes up, one goes down, right?
I'm sorry?
Not the same time, but one works one end, the other guy works the other end, correct?
Well, what it is we have, at the time that I began working on the boat, we had 600 traps. And the traps are roughly 20 inches wide, across the face. They may be 20 inches or so deep, but their length is a little bit oblong. They're probably about 28 inches oblong, and they're not very high. They're maybe about 18 inches or so high, but the bottom 6 inches of these things are filled with concrete, and they weigh like 50-60 pounds, because when you take a trap like that and how we do it is, we have, out of 600 traps, we spread 300 in a line going straight off one direction. We put them about every 30 yards, we'll drop one. Another 30 yards, 40 yards, we'll drop one. And then he'll drop one, and I'll drop one. Then when we go back, we'll get them get a soak time on them for about a week or so. When we get back to that, when I'm losing my thing here for a second. When it comes time to come back around and pull those traps again, we just begin. One guy pulls one, and now he's cleaning and clearing and this and that and the other one. Captain's pulling up to the next one. When I get ready to grab that next one, he pushes his back over again. So we're always dropping one and picking one up back and forth like this. So 300 traps one direction, switch over about 75 yards or so and come back the other directions, because each line is about 17 miles long. But so then we have lunch or whatever like that, skip over and pull the other half, so we're not twice as far away from where we began. So this is the scenario as it was imparted to me when, I had a job kind of lined up when I got to the island. His brother-in-law and sister were building a house. So I just tendered. I helped the carpenters and the masons and that kind of shit, keep some money going in. But what the captain of that boat really needed was, a couple guys he could trust. Because unbeknownst to any of us, he wanted to get back into potholing, because everybody.
Right.
These guys, everybody in town and everybody around, they're potholing like crazy, but none of us know. I mean, of course, I don't know what's going on. I'm just this ignorant kid. When you hear about little, shit like this, but they're just ghost stories until you're actually, see one. So what they did was, and the captain didn't like this guy from Michigan and didn't know him that well, didn't trust him and shit like that. But they knew us. They knew my buddy Mark, and they knew me because they knew where we came from. We came from one of the island boys that grew up there's wife's brother. I mean, so there was no doubt about us and our background and all this kind of shit. There was no, just trying to infiltrate this fucking, whatever. But because there was anybody coming into town, man, they're looking sideways at you, because there's only 500 motherfuckers there, and if somebody comes to town, we know you're there, that kind of a thing. So they worked this guy, and stone crab is such a hard business, dude. It's a hard ass job. I mean, most guys only do it for 1, maybe 2 seasons, and that's the end. They quit because they had enough of it. But at the same sense, with that in mind, it only took about a week to get rid of this guy, because they just, Captain Billy just worked his ass off and he quit. That's when they put Timmy on board. Come on, Timmy, let's get me on there. So they got me on there, and they imparted this scenario that I told you about. You get out, you get on the boat maybe 2, 3, 4 in the morning, depending on how far you have to go to get to whatever section of traps. So out of 6,000 traps we're putting 600 in different spots. I mean, we have 6,000 traps spread out all over the fucking place. We were one of the bigger operations, and we pull 600 a day. And we get around to the 10th day, we're pulling that thing, again like this. So they're imparting to me. You wake up, about just as soon as the sun comes up, and you can see that first buoy. You grab that buoy, and then you start working, and because we got some work to do. Well, I get on the boat, I go out, and we get out there, and I wake up, and the sun's up, and the bunks are in the wheelhouse. So I kind of lean over, and I look out like this, and Captain Billy, he leans over, he's got this big shit-eating grin on his face, and he goes, Timmy, he says, buddy, we're not going to work pulling stone crab traps today. He says, we're going to screw around out here all day long. And then, this afternoon, we're going to unload a pot boat from Colombia. And I said, cool.
Well, that's my question. So at this point, you're a young guy, you did some crabbing, you're out there, we're going to go on a pot run. Give us like logistics. You would go to Colombia, and how long did it take, and how many bales you come out. Tell us about your first run, Tim.
Yeah. Oh, you're skipping way ahead now. Yeah. After I had done years of working on the boat, and at one point in time, working every position that there was to work, within the organization, or however you wish to describe, what it was. Or sorry, I'm hooking my phone back up here, but however you wish to describe, what it was we were doing. But I had to learn this a little, over the years as going on, particularly where I had to go in the Caribbean to find the stuff that I needed, and to get that connection that the generations prior to us had. Now, what I was described to the kids that I grew up with, we were described by the government as third generation potholers, meaning that the fathers and uncles and older cousins and grandfathers taught us. Their generation prior to them, in turn, taught them. So this is what I'm describing in the book, and the story that I'm telling is spans 40 years plus and 3 generations of pot haulers amongst families, without ever one shot being fired at anybody. That's the beautiful thing about, the story. It's a story that you can get behind. It's one of those, you want to like the bad guy kind of a sort of a thing, because, what parent, when you think about it really, in real terms, what parent in their right mind would involve their kids in a scenario by which they find themselves against some Colombian cartel or some Jamaican, people from, wherever, no, it wasn't like that. Even the people we were buying from, around the Caribbean, they were family as well, because it was going on for so many years. I mean, the connections were there. So when it came time for me to step in and do my part, which happened very serendipitously. I mean, it didn't just, this pretty much just kind of fell upon me. I mean, the story and the things that I went through kind of, take on a bit of a Forrest Gump fucking type of, scenario. I'm tripping into shit from one thing to the fucking next, and it just so happened, to get a little bit closer to the question that you asked about, how this all works and such, is that I had opportunity one day, if you would call it that. I guess you would call it my opportunity. There was a part that I had written in the book where our crew had worked 28 nights in a row. And some of the guys would have thought it was longer, but I just left it at 28 nights. And to the tune of about 1.6 million pounds is what I did a rough calculation. Because, we went that, the first job I ever did on that boat was 15 tons. That day they woke me up and said, hey, we're going to go unload a pod boat. That wound up being 15 tons and broke my cherry on, 30,000 pounds. But from that day on, and the very next day we got on the boat to work the second day. Hell, I didn't pull a trap that day either. I worked that boat 2 days before I ever pulled a trap. I hauled 22 tons of pot the very second night I was ever on that boat.
Did you get paid for those traps? Did you get paid for working those traps? Or you
we didn't pull traps. Fuck no. I got paid rookie pay for those 2 nights, and that rookie pay wound up being $5,000 a night. And I was thinking a night, and I'm thinking, damn, this is awesome, dude, because an average, a blue collar salary in the late 70s, early 80s was about 15 grand-ish, somewhere like that. You were doing pretty good. And here I just made 10 grand in 2 nights, and I'm thinking, woo! But that turned out to be, huh?
The pot, not the grand. Okay.
The pot.
Not the grand.
Yeah.
The pot.
Yeah, no, just the holiday. Working those 2 loads, and they called it rookie pay. Just they were kind of a test run. So now that the captain understands that he's got a crew that's ready and willing and able to do the work, now I'm getting paid according to the size of the load. I'm averaging anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000 a night. Dude, I just turned 21 years old, so I'm averaging a couple $100,000 sometimes a week.
You know, 2 runs to go from rookie to a veteran.
It took no, it took a while, because like I said, my involvement in it in the very beginning was going offshore and unloading from the motherships that were coming from whatever corner of the Caribbean these things were coming in. And I didn't know it at the time until, months and seasons go by, where I realized that position that I held was at the hierarchy end of everything that was going on as far as pay goes. Because, and when you go to think about it, we're going offshore. Now, there wasn't always just us in our boat. I've got a picture somewhere that I had sent you guys, I think, of our fishing boat. We could put about 40,000, we could put about 20 tons, 22 tons on this. There it is right there. Now that's me on the right, and that's my partner, Mark. He's on the left. Now we would
you went out 30 miles into the Gulf.
Dude, we would load this fucking boat around the bow, around the sides where the windows are, stacking in that little thing there where the antenna things are, on top of the roof of the boat where the radar is, just high enough for the radar to turn. And then where I'm standing on deck with bales just like that, where I'm standing on deck as high as the roof, if not higher, and all the way back behind where you can't see it, where it goes off into the poles at the end of the boat.
But any novice, I don't even know anything about boating. If I saw that boat like sinking like more than halfway down, I'd be like, they got weight on there. What do they got on there? Like if I'm like a police officer, what do you call it? What do you call those specialists? Those border patrol people? I don't know what you call them, but
they were.
I'd be like, that boat's really low.
Well, here's the thing about that is, when we go off to load that fucking thing, there's no hiding this shit below deck, man. I mean, it's stacked fucking everywhere. Like I said, we had it stacked on the roof of the boathouse, the wheelhouse, just where the radar would turn. Anywhere we could stick this shit, dude, we were sticking this shit. And it didn't matter how low the fucking boat was sitting in the water, because, dude, if you flew over this thing in an airplane and all it would look like was a big pile of bales moving through the water with a radar on top of it. That's what it would look like. There's no hiding this shit.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like nowadays, you try and do it. You're worried about satellites. You're worried about Google Earth. You're worried about Back then, there was nothing. You didn't have to worry about anybody. And like a postcard. I mean, what did they have patrolling that large of a Gulf, right? Of an ocean mass?
Well, the patrols in those days were very slim and far and few between, because, one thing, they thought they had it pretty well covered. Whereas another thing, they had no fucking clue. I mean, to the extent to which this was going on. And I would go off as a kid. Like I said, my job was, when I just first got hired into this shit, was going offshore and meeting motherships. All I knew as a kid was 20 tons, 40-ton loads, man. I didn't know anything different than that. It wasn't.
So when the mother boats came from the Caribbean and you met up with those boats, I'm assuming they just took the bales in the water and you grabbed them from the water, or did they unload them onto your barge?
No, we would pull up. A lot of times we would pull up to these boats, and depending on how much we were there to get, and depending on actually how big the boat was. And I've seen freighters out there, man. 400 feet if they're a foot. And
so they're saying they would hand them off to you, or did they throw them in the water?
No, a lot of times, depending on how many crew were on the vessel we were about to go unload, then we could pull up and let them throw the stuff down. Because the way it works is we would sit out there offshore, just off of what's called the horizon. Okay. You sit off the horizon of the mothership like that, and that's where, if you've ever been in a boat and you've gone offshore and you're riding off in the the shoreline sinks in the distance like this and then goes away. The minute that disappears, you've reached your horizon point. That's as far as you can see on the water. So we stayed just beyond that horizon point, that visibility point, till about 4 hours or so before the sun goes down. Then the captain gets on and makes a very specific radio call sign. And when that call sign gets answered, it's answered by that boat we're approaching. So they know that the boat that's coming to them is the one that should be. So they're not all, out there, shooting guns at us and shit, or, or whatever the fuck. But
Tim, how heavy was a bale? Each bale, how heavy were they?
In the beginning, they were average 70, 80 pounds. Like the ones you have a picture of, those are averaging about 80 pounds a piece. And they were a lot easier to carry and hang on to, because they were all, now they're being pressed all the same size because inadvertently our first generations of, that were doing this had introduced the Colombians to household and commercial trash compactors back in the day, because in the early days that shit was coming, man. It was nasty.
Well, we call it, but essentially this was might be harder work. The Grabbing was 50 pounds. Now this is 80 pounds.
They're more uniform and they stack better, so the weight got more. The jobs got bigger. So now we're up in the 50-ton ranges and stuff, which brings me to that point in time at which we had worked 28 nights in a row. Yeah. And, and we're doing, like, our boat's not the only one working. There's probably, 8, 9 other boats like ours of different sizes. 2 or 3 boats would work 1 or 2 nights or 3 nights, because you can't keep working the same guys, man. You'll fucking kill them. We're talking about moving, 1,000 pieces of, 1,000 bales that weigh 800, 80 pounds a piece. If you're moving 40 tons of shit, you're moving these things at least twice a night. That's a lot of, if the stone crabbing doesn't make a man out of you, this shit will.
Now, Tim, on the risk side, right? On the risk side, obviously.
Dude, yeah. Right.
Pirating, did you have to keep a gun on you? Like, walk us through kind of what were some of the perils?
No guns, no pirating, none of that fantastic Miami Vice television Hollywood bullshit, man.
You were dealing with the cartel. So essentially, anybody who knew anything about that area, you don't try to go across. I'm assuming, correct?
Well, there's always been a saying that's gone around, and I'm fond of repeating it. And a good friend of mine, who wound up being a good friend of mine, George Young, he passed away a couple of years ago. Yeah. He was always fond of having everybody understand that the cocaine business is done with a gun, and the marijuana business is done with a handshake.
Yeah.
So when it came to and when it comes to that, like I said, I grew up in this industry as a kid. Our fathers and uncles and all these people are, we're letting the kids do this fucking shit, and they would not expose us to an element that would have put us in any way at risk.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about the way the industry could have been run and the way it was run in the days when it was done by families, and in the countries in which it was taken from, it was also family and generational by that means as well. Because when I finally took over, and what wound up happening was that night we did 55 tons. We had about 7 houses on the island at that time. This is how we work. We bring the load in, like I said, on our boat, our big boat, the motherships. We get loaded. We truck that into shore, right into where the 10,000 islands begin, because now everything shallows out really bad. Correct. There's no way that boat's drafting 7, 8 feet.
Yeah,
There's no way.
How'd you get past the wake and all that?
There's no fucking way it's going in that pass. So we sit out there. The minute we get out there, we kill our engines, and out comes, from the mangroves comes 20 or 25 smaller boats. Yeah. T-crafts, or well boats, they were called, that can go. They're shallow drafting vessels. Most of them have twin 235 Evinrudes on them, and they have a vertical and a horizontal trim, meaning the prop will go up and down like this, or it'll go out and not like a normal trim does, like this. And as long as that prop will go through the water, that boat's going through the water. So they would come out, 2 guys on each boat, like flies on a garbage can, and they would come around our boat. Their guy would jump on and start throwing and loading 30, 40 pieces onto each boat, and they would take them, make them, run them through the pass, and put it in 1, 2, or 3 of my buddies' houses that we've literally taken all the furniture out of. and stack the houses from the back to the front, living room, bedroom, dining room, kitchen, bathroom. I mean, everything, every place you could stick a bale of pot. Pull the door closed on the way out when it's full, and move next door and start filling Jimmy's house.
So hold on. So from the supply chain, right? Goes to Columbia, goes on the mothership, goes to Timmy's boat. You just throw it amongst the 20 boats. You store it in these houses, right? You now have trucks to pick this up. You're in an island area, you're in a resort area. There's pretty much one big road coming in. Who picked it up, and how did you get it off the island successfully? Because that part I'm wondering about.
Okay, well, no, that's a valid question, and you're right. You're rightfully so by asking. If you'll forgive me, I've got to keep mucking with my thing here. It keeps coming loose from my window.
I'm fascinated, by the way.
No, that's a great question too, because the offshore crew is where I worked offshore. Okay. And all the boats that brought it from us through the islands and put it into the house were the offshore crew. Once it gets put into the houses, and they're bail handlers. These guys are walking. They're walking from the dock. They're going to the house. There's a guy that owns the house. I mean, there's people working. It takes 50, 60 people to make one of these jobs.
It's an organization, yeah.
This is not a small operation we're talking about here.
You're only on onshore here in Florida. You're unloading the boats.
Yeah, in Everglades, or somewhere in Southwest Florida, because at one point I had 5 crews working, 50, 60 people on each crew. And we're working. I had boats lined up out here offshore like it was a fucking parking lot, man. Because I'm flying to Columbia and I'm buying 100, 200,000 pounds at a time, and I'm sending boats to go get the shit. But we're skipping forward and all. But in the process by which it all works is that once it gets to the house. Now, as we're loading the houses that night, coming in off of our big boats, and we're loading that house, a lot of the guys would bring their cars, trucks, vans, or whatever into where the house is being loaded, load that car and truck or van or whatever it is. They would drive it back into town and pull it in the driveway and just park it in the front of the house and leave it parked. So the next day, when actually the work begins, now everybody that's working, all 50, 60, 70, 80 people, however many we've got, however big, depending on how much shit's coming and how many people need to be worked, everybody has what we were using at that time, 2-meter radios, which had a 5-digit combination on the top that you could dial in 5 numbers, and virtually unscannable at that time, but everybody could talk freely and openly, and communication was very important.
You just say a code and switch to one of the
it's not that code shit, we're talking wide open on these things because there's nobody going to be able to scan it. That was the beautiful thing about the 2-meter radio. And everybody in a car who was driving had one. Everybody, in the offshore now, when these boats are loaded, that like we're loaded and we're coming in. I mean, these things we've got 20 tons on this fucking boat, and it ain't very moving very quickly. We're only chugging through the water about 4 or 5 knots, man. We're not making very much time at all.
I can't get over that.
Exactly. Now that thing's chugging through the water, and it's humping a load, man. Yeah. And riding next to it is a smaller boat that's we had designated it as a chase boat. And what the chase boat is a very fast offshore style type of a boat that will do about 80 miles an hour before you ask if it hits the sea. And there's nobody on there but the driver and the captain hired to be there, and he's our getaway guy. If the captain's doing his
job. Wait, so if you guys get jammed up, you guys just jump on that boat and zip?
Gone, man. Let him have the shit, because the captain can see for 50 miles on the radar. And then as things get closer to us, we can shrink that radar down. And if it looks like it's coming, that target's coming at us, we just get off the fucking boat and let them have it, man. We're off in the night, gone scot-free,
Now, in terms of the business end, right? You start off as a hauler getting paid per ton, right? But then you mentioned you were buying it later. So were you buying it and selling it eventually, or were you always hauling and getting a piece per ton?
We were what the government described as service providers. We never owned the shit, never wanted to own the shit. What we had the capability of doing was getting your shit into the country, and the means by which and the mechanism by which to do so, and a sophisticated So we were paid, when I finally took over or was taking over, I was getting paid $175 a pound for however many pounds of shit you wanted.
175 a pound?
Yeah, pay me $175 a pound. I'll go to anywhere in the Caribbean you want your fucking weed, and I'll buy as much as you want of it, and I'll put it on your doorstep for
Wait,
100.
and how many? Wait, hold on. How many pounds would you do on an average shipment?
On an average, we'll get going 40 tons on the average.
42,000 pounds a ton.
That's 80,000.
Real quick, while Tom's doing his math, can we just slow down? Because I got lost in this conversation when the logistics of it.
Yeah.
Right.
What point in Florida, around obviously the Gulf Coast, to what point in Colombia? So those 2 points, there had to be a meet point. Not one small boat would go all the way to Colombia, pick up, and go all the way back. Or
Yeah.
it would.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. One boat would go all the way to Colombia, pick up the load,
Load up, come back.
we'd unload the fucker, and he'd just turn right around and go again. You know.
And how many a day? How long would it take to get to Colombia?
Yeah.
Well, on the average, that voyage from Colombia to South Florida, barring any unforeseen weather patterns or whatnot, about 8 days, 8 to 14 days, depending on any weather, going on like that. So
24 hours.
You'd be carrying 40 tons of weed over 8 days on a boat.
yeah.
Guys, help me out here. My mind's blown.
I've unloaded boats. Hang on now. I've unloaded boats as a kid, just as a matter of course. Just okay, here we go. It's our turn. We go out, and not always was it true where you go out in the boat and the shit starts raining down on your boat, and you start stacking the shit. 9 times out of 10, we'd have to get up on that other boat, help the crew go down into the hole, pull the shit up onto the deck before they can start throwing it over and putting it onto our boat. Because I've been on ships, boats that were 400 feet if they were a fucking foot. Right. And I've seen them with as much as 250, 350,000 pounds in them. But we would go back 2, 3, and 4 nights in a row with 4 or 5 boats and get it all off of it.
Now, question though. Okay, so let's talk about the money for a second. So that's like $1.4 million, right? If you do the math, right? So was this like,
Wait, hold on. 1.4 million for what?
Per load, right? Or
no, you screwed up in your math somewhere.
Oh no, or is it 14 million I have?
Yeah, there you go.
14, I was gonna say, Tony.
You said 1.4 million, and I went, wait a minute.
No, so wait.
That's my cut.
$14 million, right? Now, was this like communism where like you chopped it amongst 50 guys, or were the top like 3-4 guys would get 90% and you just kind of took care of the workers? What was the economics when you made that 14 million on a friggin' shipment, which is insane? But
right. Keep in mind that that 14 million is for one job, and a common misconception amongst everybody who ever heard a pot hauling story is that they think
for those that are less inclined.
Yeah. It doesn't work like I bring your shit into you and I give it to you and I get paid. It doesn't
float and you get like
it doesn't work like that. When I bring your shit to you, I have to wait until that load begins to sell before I get paid out of it.
Oh, it's consignment. Got it. Okay.
If I bring your shit into you and you owe me $15 million, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send all but $15 million of it to Naples. And I'm going to keep 50 because quite literally, and here's where's the violence thing comes in. Weren't you ever scared when you're going to different countries with guns and fucking, no, fuck no. That's all bullshit, for the most part. I made $100 million deals on the corner of outside a Cuban cafe in downtown Miami, dunking Cuban bread into Cuban coffee with a handshake.
Yeah, but you had to have some issues. I owed Tom $100 the other day. He was knocking at my door.
I was actually holding on. I was holding on to his leg. I was holding on to his leg.
There has to be some. You can't tell me everything was, peachy, creamy, and hey, you owe me 15. I'll see you next week. No, come on,
dude. Listen, the only reason it was like that, and people always have another common misconception, is the violence. when you're talking about working at that level, there is no violence. And
Really?
I'll tell you exactly why.
Yeah.
Like the cartel needed you. Like it was almost like a counterbalance. Let's just say they wanted to screw you. Well, their pot doesn't move, right?
Right.
So they,
Right.
as a service provider, they always needed to pay you. So
Well,
yeah.
The only dealings I ever had, with cartel, if that's, the phrase everybody likes to use that word cartel. Well, in this case, it was a cartel, but it was actually the guy that I worked with in Colombia who was I inherited this connection through the older generations because they were working generationally with his family as well, his father. So when I met this guy, who's actually a cousin to the Ochoa brothers, which is the Cali cartel, that's as close as you're going to get to any description of this gentleman from me. Now the way it works is, I could buy all day long anywhere in the Caribbean as much fucking weed as you wanted for $10 a pound. $10 a pound. Now I can take $300,000 of some cocaine fucking cowboys money in Miami, which is to any of us at that time was 3 days of bar money at South Beach,
Yeah.
But I could literally buy 15 tons, 30,000 pounds of Colombian red bud for $300,000. And that 8-day voyage that it takes to get from South America to South Florida, by the time I've made that voyage and get into the United States territorial waters, that $100 a pound shit now becomes anywhere between $500 and $750 a pound.
Wow.
So if it's just $500 a pound that they're making, I just cleared in 8 days up of 300 grand, 15 million fucking dollars. Now, minus my fee for a job about that size is about 5 million. So I just made this guy 10 million fucking dollars off a $300,000 investment in 8 days. Now, you think he's shooting at me?
now, Tim, what's the most like who would pay? We're talking about who would pay you? How would you get paid? Like, would some guy helicopter money and like how much? Like, how did you get your money and how were you paid?
We had a house in Coral Gables that was our money house. And when it came time for me to, Carlito or Leo were only 2 Cubans that I ever worked with in Miami. I didn't want to know anybody else. You got somebody that wants their shit done, they come to you. You come to me. I don't give a fuck who they are.
You were wholesale. Yeah, you were the wholesale. You did not want to.
I don't fucking want to know them. So consequently, like I said, the way it works, if Carlito or Leo owe me, $20, $30 million, let's say, because you got to understand, I'm working night, sometimes 3 nights, 4 nights in a row. We take a break and shit like that. Now this is pay I'm not getting paid for right away.
Yeah.
So I'm getting paid for a job I did 2 weeks prior to that I really don't remember having fucking done, but I'm getting paid all these millions. And we're, at first we started counting the shit. Then it got to be, the money house had at any one time, it had close to $200-300 million of cash in this house. And
in a single stash house?
In a single stash house.
Was it like that scene in Blow where George and his buddy are in the house and they have the boxes of money? Remember?
Yeah, it was a little bit more organized. It was a little more organized than that, though. The master bedroom had hundreds. The next guest master had 50s, and then the next room had 20s, and then no one room had 10s. But the 8-car garage is where all the 5s were kept, because if you've ever seen $1 million in 5s,
you were wholesale. Why would you have lower denominations? I was just out of curiosity.
Well, everybody has to take so much of each denomination.
Oh yeah, because they're probably longer in the system.
Some poor bastard's going to be left with 5s, man.
Okay, so now you're making drug money, right? How did you watch it? How did you get into the system?
Guaranteed.
Well, as a kid, we really didn't learn that sort of thing until we got a little bit older. Actually, till I started taking things over. But as a kid, we were instructed, and we were taught very well by the older generations. And it was important to them, and obviously important for a lot of reasons that didn't take us long to understand, was that you had to be very careful about spending money and not having anything to show for it, because if you did and you started getting stupid and you start buying Vets and Ferraris and building fucking houses and you're just bling the shit up, then you're just done. You don't work anymore, man. It's over for you. But it was important for them to also understand that, you know, there was a way of life that we could adhere to, because stone crabbing in and of itself was a lucrative business. We did pretty well as stone crabbers. You know, I'm not talking about just
$100,000 a year stone crabbing, but I made 300 million pounds. But I did well on the crabs, though.
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to go for here is that, you know, I could live to a certain degree, you know, with regards to, you know, spending money. I had a brand new Corvette, you know, just as for instance, because, you know, during the season, you know, a good catch, you could average, you know, anywhere from $1,200 to $2,700 a week in those days. You know, so we were living pretty good just on the stone crabbing part of it, but that was negligible money compared to the money we were making.
So what was your first buy?
Yeah, what was your advice?
All right, guys. I never had a beautiful house. I bought this mansion.
Yeah, well, we, you know, ironically, when I think about you know, that type of thing, I never had any aspirations to do anything kind of stupid or wild or crazy like that. You know, it was just we were working too much. You know, they worked us, you know, because you didn't just pothole. You had to do the stone crabbing work during the day in order to do the pothole at night, man. So we were double timing it. So there was no fucking off time. You know, and it wasn't like, you know, you go off and you pothole and you see your buddies unloading boats at night, and the next day when you see each other or you're in town at a bar, you start talking about, man, wasn't that job? No. It was never spoken of. It was never talked about. Nobody ever said anything to anybody. But when you're talking about the kind of money that we're making and the adults getting pissed if they find out you're getting too stupid, we were figuring out ways of, you know, they showed us in, you know, some ways to how to spend money, but we had made a game out of actually trying to figure out how to do it, you know, and do it proper. And one instance I can tell you was that myself and four of my other buddies would take about 200 grand in hundreds each to Miami and South Beach for a long weekend, you know, 3-night weekend in Miami, with the sole intention of all of us coming home with just enough money for gas. So we would go in, and, you know, and the club owners loved us on South Beach, man. You know, every time they saw us coming, because we would take the tab. We'd walk into the club and just take over the tab, say, you know, let us know, you know, if you need more, you know, when the time comes, you know, and we'll send Jimmy over with his couple $100 grand or whatever, you know, and just try to literally spend all the money. And that's one way to spend money, to not have anything to show for it. You take over a club's tab.
Yeah, but I'm with you on the hyper spending, but you're at such a level, such an elite level financially at that point, that there was no level of sophistication. You didn't hire lawyers, bankers, get into real estate, maybe get strip clubs and funnel the money through there, or laundry mats. So you guys never reach a level of sophistication to launder the money?
No. That was actually in the early days of, you know, the history of that type of money. You know, when you, like, if you watch the movie Scarface, there's a famous scene whereby the banker's standing in his window at his desk on the phone, and he sees these guys carrying duffel bags full of money. Now, that scenario is actually quite real, and it actually would have taken place like that. That's not Hollywood bullshit right there, because at that time, the laundering of money was not a crime.
Correct.
So these guys were.
It was a non-reported.
Okay, and maybe I'm jumping too far in advance here, but you got fined. You went away. You got fined. And we'll get to all that. 16 million, right? Okay. If you paid that 16 million and had 20 million under your mattress and got out of jail and went to buy a house and a car, even though you paid the fine and you did your time, can they still come after you for that money?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you did the time, you paid the fine, and then they're still going to watch you to see what money you spent?
Well, yeah, because you're still, once again, you're spending undeclared cash, you know, and there's what they call the racketeering influenced corrupt organization.
We know that all too well.
That's the RICO, and I'm sure everybody knows what that is.
Under RICO?
No, unfortunately they didn't. But, you know, had I tried to pull something like that, they would have pulled that card on me.
Got it.
You know, so, you know, what they wanted it to do, and how they really actually wanted it to work, was quite simply, quite peacefully, and just, you know, the United States prosecutor told me one day, she looked me right square in the eye and said, Timmy, she said, you know, we just want this to end. because we're tired of it.
Sounds
You
like
know,
my wife.
One of the craziest things about it was, when it came to, the very serendipitous way about how it all came about for everyone, we were all facing life sentences as kids.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And little did any of us know that September 1st in 1987, the United States government changed the federal sentencing guidelines to what they call now mandatory minimums across the board.
And they became harsher, right?
What's that?
The punishment became harsher after 87, right?
Oh, Jesus, yeah. I mean, well, so that's what I'm going for here, because now, it used to be when you get caught, a guy got caught, say, in a van of shit, or, maybe a boat got popped or some shit somewhere along the line, somewhere up and down the coast like that, they would get, 12 months, 14 months, 18 months or some shit like that. And, in 6 months or so, they're on their way home, and we're keep the rent paid and the lights on and the family fed, and they just go right back to work again. And that's how we were all working under that same assumption. But then all of a sudden, here comes Operation Peacemaker, which is the operation that wound up taking my crew and everybody that I was working in Southwest Florida with that in 1988. They took us down, and little did we know that the guidelines now, getting caught for doing what we're doing, one indictment had 4 counts. Each count on the indictment was worth a mandatory 10 years to life and a $1 million fine. So if you got one indictment, you had a mandatory 40 years to life and $4 million in fines. That's how significantly the laws changed. And we had no fucking clue, man. So now everybody's, started getting faced with these life sentences, and what the government finally, they did this. What wound up happening was done by design rather than by accident. Let's just say it this way. And they gave what they were, when they started arresting, making and effecting these arrests. I was one of the first 38 to go. The Naples Daily News front page at that time was, huge news. Area part of U.S. pot dragnet. And the subtitle said 38 helped import over 150 tons. I think you may have, here it is right there, right in the middle, 150 tons. And then they've got my name down there somewhere like this. And
is that a surprise, or did you feel the heat coming?
No, it just came out of the blue, man. None of us had a clue.
I mean, but even making that kind of money, okay, you're not spending it. And didn't the old timers say, hey, listen, get a lawyer on retention. Start paying a guy to, like, God forbid this day comes down. I mean, you guys just winged everything, huh? Like, screw it. I mean, no lawyer, no guy on retention, no inside cop. You're making that kind of money. You're not trying to bribe. Back in those days, you could bribe anybody. Cops are making $5 grand a year. You can't bribe a cop.
Well,
card.
Yeah, you know what? Bribery was a very very efficient method by way of doing things in those days, because you quite simply offer a guy 10 times his annual salary to maybe go over down the street and take a nap for a couple hours. What the fuck do you think he's going to do, dude? He's going to go take a nap for a couple hours. That part was easy. Although the way we were operating and the things we were doing and the focus that we were putting was on keeping our asses from getting busted at the time we were doing what it was we were doing, by keeping our equipment upgraded, having the fastest, keeping on top of the counter surveillance technology that we were using was as good as, if not better than, what they were using against us. Because one of the crew guys I had working on my Everglades City crew was one of the Everglades Park National Rangers. He was a ranger. He introduced me to the Cuban fella in Miami that was selling the government their counter surveillance technology. Only I was buying better shit than they were buying, because I could afford better shit. So that's, and plus the boats we were using. When I finally started doing my thing, and you're talking about unloading, multiple nights and, 20 tons, 30 tons, 40 tons, and that 150 tons that they alluded to there, when I got arrested that day, 150 tons plus, they didn't find out till about a week or so later that was only about a week's work. They decided that, that's when they figured out, oh, whoa, we really opened up a can of worms here, man.
Tim, we'll get into we'll arc it out, or we'll kind of get into the arrest and what happened after. But before we get there, who was the buyer? Was it, Cuban organized crime? Were it the Colombians? Who were the distribution? So they get it from your crew. What organization was buying from you guys?
Well, there were I don't know any particular organization by any specific name out of Miami, but it was basically, I kept a distance, I kept a barrier between myself and that element through Carlito and Leo, my two Cuban partners in Miami, by not knowing. I don't want to know who the fuck's, pot I'm hauling. I don't care. And the beautiful thing about it was, when this takes me right back, and it has everything in the world to do with, the violence aspect of things. When people say, oh, violence and what if you lost their shit? Well, dude, if I can make you $10 million off of $300,000, take that math and go a little bit further. Take that $300,000 and divide it into 9,700,000, and then you get the number 32.
Yeah.
What that number 32 represents is the number of chances I've got to get your next load in before you've lost money. I can lose the next 31 loads in a row, but I get the 32nd one in. You've still made money. You haven't lost money yet. That's the ridiculous.
Was that conversation ever had? Did that ever happen?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's just
lost loads.
Common sense. The math was already done for them.
Yeah.
Well, I just spent $300,000. I just made 10 million. Well, fuck. So now, you're not going to kill the guy that just made you 10 million off of 300,000.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know about the pot business, but what it explained to me in kind of the cocaine importation at the time is it was, I think, 3%. So he's saying if I lose 90%, I still make my money at 3%. But the seize rate is actually 3% for coke, right? So if his seize rate is 3% and he holds on to 97%, he could make $300 million. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's the opposite.
You hear the stories. We watched that movie Cocaine Cowboys, and the guy in it, he's like, you had to kind of prove to them that the load got snatched. Like if it got seized, it was in the paper, and they're like, okay, it was in the paper. We see that. Yeah. You couldn't just say, oh shucks, your load was lost. Let's get them next time, guys. No, they would kill you. They would. The cartel. If you lost,
no. He's on the hook financially, but he was willing to accept the risk because if you lost 31 out of 32, he was still square. So Tim,
here's a little something that goes in hand with exactly what you guys are talking about. Yeah. We never left it to chance, like you're explaining it. We were never having to figure out a way of how to explain, oh, your fucking load got, taken. Every single time, it didn't matter if it was my boat going to Colombia, Jamaica, Venezuela, Central America, wherever the fuck it was going, or if it was their boat, however it was we were doing it, there was always one guy paid to do one specific job, and that was to count every fucking piece that came on that boat when it was loaded. They would have a guy on the boat paid to do exactly the same thing my guy was doing. Count every fucking piece that went on that boat so that when their counts added up, the boat left Colombia and it's off.
Don't laugh at me.
When it gets to Miami, they're counting the shit when it's coming out of the trucks and it's piling up and stacking up in Miami. That count should match, because now, not only that, if something happened to that shipment along the way, that guy's on the fucking boat. He's going with it. They're going to know exactly what the fuck happened to their shit if it gets taken.
Yep.
So there was always that bit of a, safety valve built in.
Don't laugh at me, Tim. But was there like a bill of lading? Like, hey, there's 30 bales, or was it all up here?
Who's going to sign for this?
No, being serious. I'm transferred $140 million worth of shit. I want it written down somewhere.
No, it's funny. It's funny you should say that, but about a bill of lading. What wound up happening, as a matter of course, over the years, particularly after I started doing my thing, was I would fly to Colombia, and I would, if you're reading the book, you'll figure out how how I was purchasing, and out of these mountains of fucking bales in the jungle and shit. And what I would do is, if I'm tasting this stuff because I'm poking it with a poke. This guy give me a 6-foot piece of bamboo with a piece of pipe on the end of it, cut like a hypodermic. and I'm shoving it. I'm sticking these bales that are way up here. They're about 10 feet up above, and I smoke a little bit of that, and I say, well, damn, that's nice. I mean, how many of those you got? Kick all of those down. And he's got guys kicking them down, and I'm spraying a very particular mark of my own on each bale. Nice. They would in turn be guys following behind us, taking them and immediately weighing them. So when I get to the total amount that I'm there to purchase, they'll let us know. Now, the reason I'm marking these bales is because what was happening in the years prior, and we did this a couple of times when I was working as a kid offloading boats. We'd offload a boat that wasn't even ours to offload.
Thanks, guys.
They're like, you fuckers unloaded our shit. We're like, okay, well then go here and unload this one. That one's ours. You can have
Tim, Big G has a question. Did you buy the boat, or did you put it in a company's name for the crabbing, or did you buy in cash and it was under who owned the boats on the books?
The boats we used to, like the crab boat that you saw that I'm standing on the stern of in that light, was owned by my Captain Billy's father.
Okay.
Was the owner of that boat. But when we're talking about boats that are traversing the Caribbean and making these trips, they could be owned by anybody who we approach to do the work. Anybody that's willing to, to sign on and make the voyage. And that's just how it worked. It's, like how we got called Saltwater Cowboys. That's the prologue to the book. And that story amounts to, this guy being approached, and his business was, buying cattle in South America and selling them wholesale on the market in New Orleans. So he was always making this voyage. So they just stopped him one day and said, hey, how would you like to, make about $1 million? And, hell yeah, who wouldn't? So this guy goes down, gets a load of cattle. They put this, 40, I think they put about 48,000 pounds of shit, almost 50,000 pounds of shit below deck. And the cattle are on the weather deck up above, railed in. So he's making this voyage. So he steams over and out of the way over towards us. And as we get a little bit closer to him, the Captain Billy, we've been working for a while now. And Captain Billy, he elbows me like this, and he hands me a pair of binoculars, and he goes, hey, Timmy, he goes, watch this, dude. He says, you're not going to believe what you're about to see, right? So put these fucking binoculars up there, and then all of a sudden, we're about a mile away, and the gates on the back of the boat open up like this, and these fuckers start hitting these cattle with a cattle prod, and off the back of the boat they start going, man. They're diving off. I mean, rolling off we're freaking the fuck out. And I'm like, what the shit, man? Yeah. And turns out, we get up there. Excuse me, let me turn the light on real quick.
Yeah. Is there any chat going
on me? And we're pulling up to the boat, and these things are clunking the heels and the horns against the colonization. So we yell up to this crazy fucking captain and said, what the fuck are you doing, man? We can't very well get this bloody shit out of the hole with all these cows on the boat.
That's nuts. Really quick, Tim, I want to go through some of the pictures before we wrap up, and I know Jason might have a question or two. But pictures. Who's that's you and who?
Okay, yeah. If you go back to that picture of the Naples Daily News, the front page newspaper, yeah. You see the officer escorting that guy right there on the left hand side there. That is John Deasy, United States Customs Officer Supervisor, and that is me in LA Fitness working out with him some 32 years later.
How'd you catch up with him? How'd that happen?
Dude, I was sitting at that, I just got done working out. I'm sitting on the bike upstairs talking to a buddy of mine, and this guy walks up, and and I'm not to pay attention to the conversation, but I overheard him say United States Customs, Marco Island, Naples, and then he said 1980s, and that's when I went, whoop, hang on a second. I said, I've got a bit of a history with customs during those days, and he says, I was on one of those newspapers on the front. I said, I don't remember which one it was, but I think I was on one of those, and the conversation just kind of ended like that. I didn't give it any thought till I'm on the way home. And I'm thinking, no fucking way, man. So I get home, open up the page, and there's this guy right here. That's what a stone crab trap looks like right there.
Nice.
The bottom 6 inches of those are solid concrete. That's why they're so heavy. Now, this was a caricature that was done by a gentleman who came on the island, and was offering to do these oil paintings for any of the captains, and 7 captains commissioned different paintings, and his characters just happened to be Disney characters.
Oh, that's hysterical. Oh, I want to get that for my son.
There's in the very back, in the background, there's Goofy in a wellboat, which is a very shallow drafting mullet boat, taking bales into the house, through the islands. And there's Grandpa Duck is on the back of the boat counting money, and Mickey's handing Donald bales in the tea craft right there next to the boat. But if you take a look at that boat, how that guy made our crab boat, and look at the picture that I gave you of our boat. That's the picture he drew it from right there.
Now, what's this? This is not good.
That's the one boat.
That's not good.
This is during Operation Everglades #1. This is when 270 plus agents finally came in and raided Everglades City and shut everything down. And this is all the roadblock it took.
Yeah, I was gonna say
4 cones.
Wow, that's 10,000 islands.
Dude, this is our backyard, man. This is where.
Hold on, real quick. Stay on that picture. You mean to tell me? No, the next one, the Everglades one. So there was no GPS, nothing going on back then. There was what was called LORAN, long range aid to navigation, and it was very accurate. It was the GPS of the day. So you could, okay. The captain of the boat, when you started, or whoever, they were such professionals. They could go in and out. Look at those turns. I mean, you could hit a dead end at any time if you made the wrong turn. And
dude, that's where we played as kids, and that is very deceiving because a lot of those bays, they're mud flats. I mean, very deceiving. They're only 3-4 inches deep, in a lot of these places. Now, this guy was a very cool dude. His name was Dennis Lehman. He was a bank robber that I'd met, had been in for 32 years when I first met him. He'd already done 32 years for bank robbery. Wow. He was in the Guinness Book of World Records for having been given the most amount of time for that particular crime, which was 52 years for bank robbery. And he didn't even rob the fucking bank. He was flying the plane for the 2 bank robbers, for the guys that actually robbed the bank. But they took opportunity at will, because for years prior to that, he was flying cocaine from Mexico to Nevada, and they couldn't catch him. So when they finally got him with this bank robbery thing, they hung him up by his balls. But that picture is him handing me my degree for literary arts that I had gotten, and my law degree that I got through the University of Honolulu while I was in prison.
Amazing.
That's crazy. So those pictures are incredible. And you to catch up with that one guy in the gym is insane to me.
Yeah, John and I we did a video in 2017 for Vice. They came down and shot for 3 days, and did an hour video with John and I. They put a 9-minute, 38-second clip of it online, and within the first 24 hours, it had 1.1 million views. Yeah. And to this day, I think it has 110 million views around the world. I wound up getting 12 million followers and fans out of Australia, 4 million out of New Zealand, and now I'm accumulating as many as 3.5 million followers out of the Philippines, for Christ's sake. I don't even know how that happened.
So, listen, we interview a lot of people in organized crime, Tom more than me, but the story, they get caught and they've made hundreds of millions, and every single one of them tell us, the government took it all, I spent it all, I got no more left. Now, did you save anything? And blink if if it's yes. Did you say? I mean, you can't tell me that you made all that money and you did 100 grand, 10 grand, something.
No, you know what? The sole and simple reason for that was because at that time, I didn't know till right up until nearly the very end that my sentence wasn't going to be a life sentence. All I knew at that point was, hell, I've got a life sentence coming, man. What's the point of, life save money? Woo! Dude, I was having one hell of a fucking head. I mean, you can imagine that, the parties we were having, the shit I was buying. I was buying cars. We went and bought, actually, I did. I spent, it was quite a bit of money. I bought one of the most expensive Corvettes, RSs that they were building at that time. And I was about a week from going in, from going to prison. And I bought this I think at that time it was like a $24,000 car. And what I did was I paid for the car over several days. And I knew the owner and I knew the son of the dealership, the Chevrolet dealership where I was buying this Camaro, because that's where I bought my Corvette from. And what I told him was, going to have a guy come in and test drive this car, but I want this one particular salesman that I knew from a Nissan dealership up the street, who one of my best friends family owned all the Nissan dealerships where I was buying cars from too. And I bought this car and I said, when he comes in, I want that guy to sell him this Camaro and take it for a test drive. So when my buddy went in there and did his thing, they set him up with this fucking salesman. He took him out there and I said, what I need you to do is take it about, 3 blocks down the street to the Kmart parking lot where they have those, the lights in the parking lot have these big concrete buttresses. I said, what I'd like you to do is try and hit every fucking one of them in the parking lot that you can hit with this car. He takes this thing down the street. I mean, screaming, wah, 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 tires blazing. He gets down there and this thing comes back. There's no windshield in it. The side doors are like like this. And the glass is just, this guy's covered with glass and he's screaming, he's yelling, he's cussing this motherfucking guy out. And as soon as he sees me, he's trying to get the door open to this car to get at me. Right away, he knows I put him up to it. It was a joke. He totally beat the shit out of the car because I was trying to piss away 25 grand,
I get it.
So Tim, what we're going to do, everyone, and those on the replay, we're going to wrap it up. And what I want you to do is check out the Saltwater Cowboy. It's on Amazon. We're going to put a link below. We're going to have you check out the book. And then we're going to invite Tim on. Tim's been generous with his time today. But we'll invite him on and we'll kind of go through the tail end of how everything panned out. I know he kind of gave a little bit of a hint, but we don't want to give too much away. We want you to check out the book. Again, Tim's been generous with his time. So the book is Saltwater Cowboy. So, Tim, we're going to wrap up. I do have a question. If you could have dinner, you can say criminal. You don't have to say gangster, but you could have dinner with any criminal, dead or alive. Who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. If I could, it would have to be dinner with my friend George Young again.
Oh, that's awesome. Amazing. Yeah.
Because he was, portrayed rather accurately in the movie by Johnny Depp. But, of course, there was a lot of Hollywood interjected into it as well. And his partner, Diego, in the movie, I don't know if you guys even know this or not, was actually Carlos Slater.
Yeah. His own island, his own
strip. One of our guests actually served with him a little bit.
Norman's Cay actually does exist. And if you fly over Norman's Cay today, you can see those very airplanes that never made it or almost didn't make it.
That's crazy.
Absolutely. But yeah, George, I think, because he was just just really the nicest guy, man. He had vices like we all have, and ultimately that's what took a hold of him. But bless his heart, that's who I would pick.
That's awesome.
Now we're gonna wrap up, but before we go, how can somebody find you? Are you on social media? Do you have a website? I'll put a link below to the book, but how can people find you if they're looking for you?
I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram at Original Saltwater Cowboy. My email is either originalsaltwatercowboy@gmail.com or it's pothauler, POTHAULER @gmail.com. And what a lot of people are fond of doing, and my book is now, and for the last 5 months, has been into its 2nd edition printing, which is very awesome.
That's a big deal in the publishing world. They don't do that.
That's huge, particularly a book that has not been designated as a #1, as a bestseller, but is such a demand that the hardcovers, you'll notice when you go on Amazon to look, are selling at ridiculous prices.
Yeah, I'm just looking now. The paperwork's only available, I believe. Yeah.
Dude, I've seen them for as much as $200 trying to sell a hardcover, because they're that in demand. But $21.99 gets you a paperback that's every bit that the hardcover is. The only difference is it's not a hardcover. And
I'm getting a few bucks on the book, though, at least.
Yeah, well, yeah, not on the resale. This guy is selling for $200, man. I got mine the first time.
I know.
That's the suck
Oh, you
part.
gotta sell signed copies. That's how you make
There
your
you
money.
go.
You know?
But what along with those emails, potholler@gmail or original saltwater cowboy @gmail. If you'd like to, purchase the book, go ahead and email me, because there's a process by which I can get your book signed for you and get it back to you.
Oh, that's great.
Tim knows a guy who knows a guy. I love it.
Yeah,
Tim.
yeah. I know this guy in Miami, dude.
Listen, we had
Hey,
high hope
you
for this one.
guys got this much of something that is just
Oh, we know it's an iceberg.
out of control, man. But thank you so much for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure. And I'd love to come back. Let's do that comeback thing, man. That's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thanks everybody in the chat. Thanks so much, Tim. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Love you guys.